It had been almost a year since we moved into our spacious five-room house, and life seemed to be going smoothly. But one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. After grocery shopping, I came home, put the food away, and went to my room. However, when I entered, all of my belongings were gone. I stood there in shock, unsure what to think, until I heard soft laughter behind me. Turning around, I saw my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, both wearing smug smiles. "We decided to use this room for ourselves," my sister-in-law said. "Your things are in a storage unit. If you don't pick them up within a week, we'll throw them away." My mother-in-law tossed a piece of paper with the storage details at me, and it landed on the floor near my feet. I was too stunned to say anything. Arguing wouldn't help. It was 2 against 1, and I knew they'd twist things to make me look bad. Quietly, I gathered the few belongings I had left and left the house. I went back to my parents' place, but as I sat there, I knew I couldn't let them get away with this. They had gone too far, and I needed to do something about it. Fred, my husband, was away for work and didn't know what had happened. When I finally told him, he couldn't believe it. "They did what?" he exclaimed. "This is crazy. We need to fix this." Fred and I had always worked well as a team. We met in college, bonded over our love of books, and built a happy life together. His kindness and fairness were what I loved most about him, and now those qualities were helping me through this mess. Together, we decided it was time to stand up to his family. What my mother-in-law and sister-in-law didn't know was that the house wasn't actually ours. It belonged to my cousin, who had moved abroad and rented it to us at a low price. When I told him what had happened, he was furious. "They crossed the line," he said. "Don't worry, I'll take care of this." The next morning, a group of 10 men, friends of my cousin, showed up at the house to help us take it back. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law tried to resist, yelling and making threats, but the men didn't care. "This house doesn't belong to you," one of them said. "You have no right to stay here." Their belongings were quickly packed up and put outside. As they stood in the driveway, looking angry and embarrassed, I felt a small sense of justice. For months, they had treated me like I didn't belong, and now they were finally being held accountable. But the trouble didn't end there. My mother-in-law started spreading lies about me to our relatives, claiming I had kicked her out of spite. Soon, I was receiving calls and messages from family members asking why I had done such a thing. Each time, I calmly told them the truth, but some of them still believed her. It was exhausting. Fred stayed by my side through it all. "We don't need their approval," he said. "As long as we know the truth, that's what matters." His support gave me strength, but I couldn't help feeling upset by all the drama. Months passed, and life started to get better. Fred and I focused on our future, leaving the family issues behind. Just when we thought everything had settled, another problem arose. 9 months after being evicted, my mother-in-law showed up at our door with suitcases. "I have nowhere else to go," she said, walking right into the house. Fred and I exchanged surprised glances. "Why can't you stay with Amy?" Fred asked, referring to his sister. "Amy moved in with her boyfriend and left me," my mother-in-law replied bitterly. "I sold the family house thinking we'd live together, but she had other plans. Now I'm all alone. Despite everything, Fred couldn't turn her away. She can stay for a while," he told me later. "But if she causes problems, we'll have to figure something out." It didn't take long for problems to start. She refused to help around the house and acted like I was her servant. One night, while I was cooking dinner, I overheard her on the phone with Amy. "It's great here," she said. "I have 2 people doing everything for me." Hearing that made my blood boil. That night, I told her she needed to contribute. "You can't just sit around while we do all the work," I said. She laughed. "I'm Fred's mother. It's his job to take care of me. You should be grateful I'm here." Fred had had enough. "Mom, this can't go on," he said. "You need to find another place to stay." "You're choosing her over me," she cried. "This isn't about sides," Fred replied. It's about respecting boundaries. The situation escalated, and we knew something had to be done. With my cousin's help, we found a way to legally evict her. It was a tough process, but we had no other choice. The day she left, she shouted insults at us, saying we'd regret our decision. When the door finally closed behind her, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. The fight had been draining, but we had stood our ground. Fred and I promised to protect our peace and happiness no matter what. A week later, Fred and I were finally able to breathe again, but our peace was short-lived. Just as we were settling back into our routine, a letter arrived in the mail from Fred's uncle. It detailed how our mother-in-law had been spreading more stories about us, twisting events to portray herself as the victim. Worse, she had convinced some relatives to confront us at our home. "We need to be prepared," Fred said. "We can't let her keep dragging us into this chaos." He suggested inviting his uncle over to mediate the family dispute and set the record straight. I hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. It felt like the only way to finally put this drama to rest. When the relatives arrived with Fred's uncle, tensions were high. My mother-in-law had filled their heads with so many lies that they came ready to blame us. But Fred's uncle had brought evidence. Photos, letters, and even testimonies from neighbors that painted a very different picture. As the truth unraveled, the relatives' anger shifted away from us and toward her. "How could you do this to your own son?" one of them asked her. "You've caused nothing but trouble." For the first time, my mother-in-law was speechless. She didn't have an answer. Fred and I finally felt vindicated, but the experience had left us drained. "Let's focus on ourselves now," Fred said. "We've done everything we can to set things right." We decided to take a short trip to reconnect and recharge. The getaway was exactly what we needed. Walking along the beach, hand in hand, we talked about our dreams for the future. It reminded us of why we fell in love in the first place. Back home, we started fresh. Fred and I worked together to decorate the house, turning it into a true sanctuary. Each room became a reflection of our journey, a place of love, resilience, and hope. The drama with his family wasn't completely behind us, but we had built a foundation strong enough to withstand anything. Months later, we received unexpected news. Fred's mother had moved to another state to live with a distant cousin. She had finally stopped interfering in our lives. As for us, we continued to grow stronger together, grateful for the lessons we had learned and the peace we had fought so hard to achieve.